Today, I welcome Shawn Stevenson to the podcast, who is a longtime podcaster. He has his own show called The Model Health Show. Some of you may have heard of that before. He also has two books, Sleep Smarter and the new one, Eat Smarter. And Shawn is just like me. He hates the food system the way it is and tries to simplify things as much as humanly possible. So his story we dive into a little bit in this show, but then also sort of navigate all of the things that are stacked against us to try to be healthy in a modern world beyond just nutrition as well. So this one is super packed full of a lot of interesting tips that you guys can take with you and hopefully implement starting today. So tune in and I hope you enjoy. This episode is brought to you by White Oak Pastures, a fully regenerative farm based out of Bluffton, Georgia. If you guys don't know how obsessed I am about regenerative agriculture, you probably haven't been around listening to this podcast for a long time. This is a type of farming that mimics natural ecosystems to restore the loss of soil, biodiversity, and best of all, pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. I recently actually just purchased a farm here in Texas to start learning about this myself, but White Oak has been around doing this for decades, and it shows in the research. They actually recently got a study done showing that for every pound of meat that you eat from White Oak Pastures, you're actually putting 3.5 pounds of carbon back into the soil. When you have this ecosystem where all the animals work together, you actually get carbon pulled back into the soil. Whereas the fake meat, Beyond, Impossible, et cetera, they put 4 pounds of carbon into the atmosphere. So if you're gonna really do any sort of choice for the environment or for your own health, this is the way to do it. These are the types of farms to support. I love their products, and not only their animal products, which they have a bounty of, all the way from the classic chicken, turkey, pork, and beef, but also guinea, duck, rabbit, goose, etc. I mean, this is what it takes to have a regenerative model. And you can try them all today for 20% off with code NATURALSTATE. Just head to dranthonygustin.com/meat to check out some of my favorites. I love all their products, but one of my favorite is actually a wild card here. You probably wouldn't be able to guess, but it's their beef tallow body wash, which I use daily instead of soap. So if you want to try out some of the best regenerative meat on the planet, head to dranthonygustin.com/meat and use code NATURALSTATE for 20% off your order. This episode is brought to you by Element, or LMNT, which is an electrolyte beverage brand founded by Rob Wolf, Luis Villasenor, and Tyler Cartwright. 2 of 3 of those guys have actually been on this show to talk about why they started this company and their background in this space. But mainly they have worked with literally thousands of people. And these are some of the most qualified experts that I learned a lot from in the early days of when I was doing keto and helping research and help a lot of people. And the number one thing that these guys saw was that people were having an extremely hard time switching to low carb because they were simply not getting enough electrolytes. But as you guys know, I often complain about the supplement industry is full of absolute trash, that people using artificial ingredients, fillers, sugar, etc., and they could not find an electrolyte that met their standards, not only from lack of ingredients, but not having the highest amount of sodium, potassium, and magnesium that they thought needed to exist in certain ratios. So they launched Element, and I drink them myself daily. So I've been a long time user, basically since the first day they launched. And whenever I go back to eating keto or lower carb after eating moderate amount of carbs, I need these things at least a couple times a day, or else I feel like crap. Especially in the summertime here in Austin, Texas, where it's 150 degrees every single day, and I'm working out outside, playing basketball, hanging out with friends, and sweating my face off. I typically have up to 4 of these in a day. My favorite is the citrus salt, which is the original one, but the raspberry and habanero are also my favorites as well. So if you guys want to hear more about Element and my favorites and why I use it, head on over to drinklmnt.com/TNSP. That's drinklmnt.com/TNSP. Thanks for coming on the show today.
It's totally my pleasure.
You've been in this health and wellness sphere for a long time, kicking around different ideas, evolving.
It's kind of weird at this point. It didn't really hit me until working on this latest project that, it's been 19 years that I've been in this field, and, 10 years in clinical practice. And, a lot has happened in this time frame. But I think at this point, it just so happens kind of hitting a stride in, there's a statement that sticks with me all the time. There's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And just right now, we have to demand a shift to focusing on what creates a healthy human being. You know, the way that our system is structured, as you know, it's very disease oriented, you know, it's very oriented on the treatment of symptoms and not actually looking at what actually makes people work awesome, you know? So I'm very excited about it because I think we have a lot of opportunity in front of us to really get our communities healthier.
Yeah, definitely. What was your practice focused on?
So when I went to school initially, and this is so funny, like I haven't really even shared this story very often, but I went to a prestigious private university with a great pre-med track because of what I saw on TV. You know, I'm from an environment, I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college. Like I'm from an environment where, you know, it's very, just going outside your door, you know, you're taking a risk, like for real, you know, you can get, you know, drive-by shooting, but even the stress wasn't just outside my door, it's inside my door. You know, the level of violence and aggression that, you know, I saw on a almost daily basis, you know, it's just something, it's very, very trying circumstances, you know, to say the least. But, you know, even within those things, there's beauty. You know, of course, you don't really see it at the time, oftentimes, but, you know, I was really taught by my environment and, you know, particularly by my mother, how to survive, you know, how to make something out of nothing, you know, so often. And even what's in this new work, we were born into conditions where we were inundated. We were just absolutely inundated with things that make humans sick, you know, from the very structure of the world around us to the food that we were exposed to. I didn't know that food mattered. You know, I didn't know that there was a difference. I didn't know there's a difference between, you know, my bologna and, you know, some wild caught salmon. Like I had no idea that it mattered. You just are trying to survive. And, you know, we got food, you know, food stamps, WIC. We were getting food from food shelters, you know, this place called the Hosea House. Shout out to the Hosea House for feeding us a little. But the thing was, what's so interesting is that, you know, my mother, she did whatever she had to do to take care of her three kids. She sold her blood, you know, many times. She worked overnight. And there's also this concept in our psyche of like, you know, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work harder, the American dream. When you're so layered with oppression and danger and things that, you know, are just kind of innately just treacherous, it's very tough. And she worked overnight at a convenience store. And this was like a great moment in my life because she'd always bring me home a pack of baseball cards in the morning. Like I wake up to that and had a little stick of, you know, super stale gum, that little pink stick of gum. But one of those nights, you know, as she's trying to work and provide for her kids, you know, she was thinking about going back to school. She was held up and she was stabbed 8 times and she still fended off the defender again. Like I come from a very tough environment, tough people. My mother's a very, very rough, tough human. And she subdued the guy. When she went to the hospital that night, the doctors told her, you know, the physician she worked with, you know, stitched her up, told her that if it wasn't for you being overweight, you would have died. You would have died. You would have lost your life. Your weight saved you. Wow. And just think what that does psychologically to a human when they feel that the thing that's making them sick is protecting them, you know, and how many people have those same kind of outer expressions. Our bodies are really an expression of so many different things that are going on with our psychology, you know. So to kind of, you know, circle back on this story, you know, right now we're at a very interesting time. You know, when I went to school, like I said, my belief about going and doing pre-med was based on what I saw on television, you know, watching TV shows, you know, where like the Cosby Show and there's like a doctor and a lawyer is like, well, I should do that. I want to have a happy family. But I absolutely hated science. I mean, I hated it. I had nightmares for years about biology class. And this particular biology class too, I'm thinking of it now. It's not good vibes. And so I got out of it. I got out of that program, but it was optional for me to take. But I took a nutritional science class at this private university, big auditorium classroom. And the very first day the teacher walked in, he was overweight. He was teetering on being obese, and he's about to teach us nutritional science. And the thing was, after getting to know him, he was freaking brilliant. He was doing the things that he was teaching. but he was blaming himself for the things not working.
Right.
It's just, he just needs to do it harder. Because we were, it was the food pyramid. And this is what we were supposed to teach people that we work with, 7 to 11 servings of healthy whole grains a day. So he's like, well, I just need more whole grains. I just need to grain it up. Right. And so not understanding the very things that he was teaching, that he was indoctrinating us with, were making him sick. And so to put a cherry on the story, I got out of that because of another cultural influence that, from TV. It was the movie Boomerang with Eddie Murphy. He was doing like marketing and advertising, whatever. So I was like, oh, that looks good. I'll do that. So I shifted my coursework, but then fate had other plans for me. I was diagnosed with this degenerative disc disease, and my spine was just breaking down rapidly. And, the physician that I was working with at the time, he told me that I had the spine of an 80-year-old man when I was 20. And I was just in this chronic, debilitating pain. I had actually broke my hip earlier when I was 15, when I was aspiring collegiate athlete. Everything was looking good. Offers coming in. I ran a 4.5 40 when I was 15, but I broke my hip running because my body was breaking down. Because of the conditions and what I'm eating, what I think is normal, I'm making my body out of these things. And I didn't know at the time that food mattered, and so the last part of the story is, through that process of struggle and being told I have this so-called incurable condition, finally, it took 2 years. Every physician that I saw 4 physicians over the course of 2 years. No matter when even though it was 2 years after the first one, this is what they did. They looked at the MRI. They told me there's nothing I can do about it. They gave me a new prescription, and they told me bed rest. I could walk, but they told me bed rest. It was painful, but they told me to do nothing. And it was 2 years later, I finally stopped asking this question. And as we talk about this in the book too, about how powerful the human brain is a servo mechanism, instinctive elaboration. And the questions you ask yourself, I was asking, why me? Why me? Why won't somebody help me? It was the first time I asked, what can I do to get better? And that set off a chain reaction of events. And eventually I shifted my coursework back to studying biology, nutritional science, kinesiology, all that good stuff. Graduated and worked as a nutritionist for, again, like I said, 10 years in clinical practice. I just bumped into somebody here in LA yesterday who came to my office, but he was working for somebody at the office. And he was telling me how he changed my life when he bumped into me in the hallway, and I guess he had some Starbucks something. I was like, I gave him a couple he was like, dude, I started listening to your show. I listened to every episode from number 1 to, these years. My wife is a big fan. It's the craziest, most amazing thing. And now I've impacted the lives of millions of people. And, here I am. So that's it. And that's me in a nutshell. That's from Austin Powers.
It's a journey. It's sort of funny about what you said around the nutrition professor being overweight, following his advice. My nutrition professor in grad school was on the other end of the spectrum, and he was extremely gaunt and emaciated and looked sick. It looked like if I pushed him, he would fall and break all of his bones. And he was vegan slant, very much so on the just reduced calories, eating grains, all this type of stuff. And he did not look healthy. He didn't look healthy. He actually died a couple of years after I left school.
Wow, that is a story.
Yeah, and so again, he was following all the advice. He was living when he was teaching. I was already into kind of a paleo-ish lifestyle at this point. It was 2010 that I took this class, and we had a lot of debates openly in class, and he was not a big fan of me. But it was wild to see that in school and having everybody else soak up that information. Very few other people question it because it's we're told what we're told. And I think when people are impressionable and they, especially paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for education, expect that people know what they're talking about. And I think that COVID has accelerated a lot in the last 8-10 months or so. Things that I think that were already starting, but it's sped a lot up. And I think one of those things actually has been distrust in our authority figures. And it sort of goes along to what you were saying before around there's too much misinformation right now, and you can't just take what everybody else is saying for truth. you need to go out and you need to learn stuff, whatever's important to you. And, I applaud people like you. Like, I'm trying to do this work as well, like enabling people with more information. And I hope that people come and question me. I hope that I get, poked and prodded and make sure that I'm on top of my game as well. But everyone needs to step up and figure out, what's important to me. What are my goals? Like, where am I standing? Where do I want to walk? And then start taking one step forward and getting their information instead of just from any old source. Like, you got to have that sort of ownership in what you're learning. It's hugely important.
Absolutely. So it's right now, like you just said, it can look like some dark circumstances, but I truly do believe that some of these things were necessary, kind of calling to arms, some action, because the truth is so many of these issues were just festering underneath the surface. I talked to friends of mine, especially in this space, we can become a little bit unaware of what's happening in the world around us when you're around other healthy people and having healthy conversations. But the truth is, here in the United States, over 200 million Americans are overweight or obese right now already. Within the next 10 years, half of the United States population will be clinically obese. This is it's not a joke. It's not hearsay. This is what it is. And on top of that, 135 million Americans are right now type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic. 60% of Americans have some degree of hardening of the arteries, heart disease. 115 million Americans are regularly sleep deprived. I can go on and on and on. Meta-analysis recently, only 12% of Americans are metabolically healthy. It's, what are we doing? What are we doing? How are we supposedly so advanced, yet we are the sickest nation in the history of humanity? Self-inflicted, to be clear, self-inflicted. It makes no sense. And we spend $4 trillion last year in our healthcare system. It makes absolutely zero sense. And it's because the system, of course, like we said, is designed and geared towards the treatment of these symptoms and the farming of sick people. And if we don't look at this, we can't actually do something about it.
Well, I mean, you even said that you went to doctors for low back pain and no one connected the dots. That was something that came from lifestyle, probably nutrition, a lot of other things. And I don't know if you know, but I mean, last time I checked, at least, low back pain is the number one cause for people going to the doctor. Number one. Vast majority have no, like, to connect that with nutrition, let alone to connect diabetes and nutrition, I think is already tough enough. But physical pain and nutrition, yeah, forget about it. You're talking about breaking your hips, breaking down. I mean, there's so many different ways we need to do this, but like you were saying, it's so tough to cross this chasm. Like, we have such a messed up system where, I remember back when I was young as well, I was eating Doritos and toaster strudels and Pop-Tarts and thinking that was healthy. And I had no idea that that impacted anything about me. I was overweight, felt like shit, tons of health problems. My family all had health problems. Nobody wanted them, but the dots just were so far apart to be connected that, I mean, that's a huge thing of how I think about it now. It's like, it's easy for me now to look back and be like, whoa, you should just stop eating those things. This is a journey that took me 10 plus years to get there. It took you seemingly a bunch of years to get there. And I sort of think about, my work is, how do I get people to connect those dots faster? It's not easy though. I mean, what are some of the top things? I mean, obviously you read a couple of books around your ideas in this space, but we sort of isolate it into, it's an infinite amount of ways we can go here, but top reasons why people are at this state with, 60% of people with a chronic disease, with almost all those people taking a medication for the rest of their lives. So a third of people diabetic, pre-diabetic, over 50% of people overweight or obese. I mean, it's insane. So what are some of the main reasons why you think we got there?
Yeah, this is such a good question. And this is just, I'm very data-driven human. I'm a very analytical person. We could say it's by nature, but I think there's a little bit of nurture in there too. But, we have to look at right now, and I just mentioned just a smidgen of all the issues that I could be talking about. But the one important takeaway too is that everything continues to get worse every year. Everything. Heart disease goes up, cancer, Alzheimer's, obesity, diabetes, everything just keeps getting worse and worse. And yet we have the most expensive healthcare system in the world, $4 trillion. And we can't even understand what a trillion is. It's like 999,999 billions plus one more for good measure. And then multiply that times 4. Like, it's insane. And with that is the fact that of all these conditions, right now, 70% of United States citizens are on pharmaceutical drugs already, treating symptoms. Even though that's our main metric, it's not working. And we have to get that. We have to wake up and just simply look at the data. Is this working? Are we getting better? We're getting far worse. And here's the big thing for me, really wanting to impress upon culture and really help to usher in this change, which I know is possible, is a change in how we actually see food. Because for most folks in our society today, when they hear the terms diet and nutrition, it's largely related to weight. Mm-hmm. And it is a factor in that, absolutely. But how has that served us? Just seeing it through that one little pithy box. And the truth is this: the food that we eat makes up everything about us. It makes up our neurons, our dendrites, our axons. The very things that enable us to have thoughts, feelings, and emotion is made from food. Our heart, it's made from the food that we eat. Our blood vessels and the blood running through it is made from the food that we eat. Even the tiny bones in our ears that's enabling folks listening right now to pick up these vibrations and create those electrical signals in our brain, made from food. My spine, my disc that were degenerated so much, my physician said I had the spine of an 80-year-old man when I was 20. It's made from the food that I eat. All of these structures, everything about us is made from food. And to put it in this pithy little box of, if you just manage your calories, you can you be a little bit more lean. It's a crime that's been promoted by our wellness, supposed wellness system, our healthcare system, looking at food through the lens of this isolated thing over here. And it's deeply ingrained in conventional education for physicians. I know, man, some of my friends are top in their field, top cardiologists in the world, top gastroenterologists. This guy, for his 16 years of education, 16 years, his focus is organs that maintain and work in the digestion of food. Those are the organs he's focused on in treating organs related to the digestion and assimilation and elimination of food. And yet in 16 years, he had 2 weeks of science and nutrition. And it wasn't even real shit. It was like, here's what to do if somebody has a super rare, not a B9 deficiency kind of thing, There's something fundamentally flawed when the physician their job is to treat organs that work to digest food doesn't know shit about food. And so my mission and what is we have to make this inspiring and empowering and fun. And that's what I really set out to do with Eat Smarter, is to add more legs under the belief system of how powerful food is. So we dive into some of the most fascinating data. Now, of course, we break down how food controls metabolism. We actually take people behind the scenes for the first time in book form in a way that makes sense, and actually teach people how their metabolism works, specific hormones involved, specific endocrine organs, all that stuff. But in a way that, again, it makes sense and it's fun. So they know how it works. But on top of that, we focus on all of the incredible, mind-blowing peer-reviewed evidence on which specific foods, by eating this nutrient directly within a matter of days, at most a matter of weeks, can improve your memory. Which foods are clinically proven to enhance your ability to focus and to increase your attention span, even when there's distraction around you or when you're under stress. Also, one of the most powerful things about the book is we look at the data on how food affects our ability to perspective take and have patience. Mm-hmm. And our proclivity towards aggression and violence is directly controlled by our nutrition or lack thereof. And the data is mind-blowing. So right now, when we're needing to communicate more than ever and people are not doing it, we have a society of very, very unhealthy people that simply, it's not that they want to be this way. My family did not want to be this way. All the people that I lost, we just didn't know. And also, when we know a little bit, it's often twisted and the truth is manipulated and is not even a part of what they've been taught. So getting folks educated on how much food matters, how much food is influencing every area of our lives. And, we have a chapter called Edible Sleep and looking at specific nutrients and foods that help to create the sleep-related hormones and neurotransmitters that make the magic happen. It affects everything about us. And that's the lesson that I want people to learn.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty detailed book for a guy who doesn't like biology. It's good. I mean, it's good to
admit
people. I mean, it's tough to cover this material without having people understand. And that's the thing of like, how do you get people to grow the trunk of knowledge? That way they can hang a branch and a leaf on it instead of trying to put leaves all over the place that just fall to the ground. Yeah, it's good. It's detailed and relatable. It's awesome. And I mean, like, I think one of the biggest things we talk about, all this chronic disease, people being unhealthy, the most visible, I mean, it's all tied together. It's all part of the same thing. And the most visible way we can tell is generally by obesity and overweight. We can see people's skin quality, energy, bags under their eyes. There's some physical markers where you can be like, okay, this person's unhealthy. Like if we saw a squirrel walking around this way who looked like that, like we would say, what the hell is going on with the squirrel? Like what happened in this environment? And so for humans, I think it's like, yes, there's this whole big fat shaming thing or whatever, but ultimately I think people can understand, does this person looks like a healthy organism or not? And I think that this is one of the biggest things that people get motivated by as well. Having these longer chronic diseases develop over 20, 30, 40 years, heart disease, cancer, neurodegeneration, even diabetes. There's not much incentive for a feedback loop for people to change their behaviors based upon something that could happen to them in 40 years from now. And this is where I think that fat loss is a good sort of entry or a wedge into cracking people's minds open and giving them what they want, what they're motivated by, which is either avoiding shame from, feeling better about themselves or getting made fun of, but having them be, okay, I can lose some weight, can feel better, I can look better. And then if you do that, you're likely going to solve all the other problems as well. So when it comes to fat loss, you have a super detailed section in the book around how you view it, which is a little bit different, but curious how you simply break it down. Because it's one of those things where anytime in life, anytime there's anywhere with lack of nuance, I tend to sound the alarm and say, okay, this is a problem in the way of thinking. So with fat loss, this has been an abundance of this over the years. You have people saying like, oh, it's just calories in, calories out. It's just that simple. No, yeah. It's just low carb or high carb or whatever. No. Oh yeah. Fat leads to being fat. No, it's not the case. Again, any complex topic, there should be complexity and nuance, but the trick is, how do you break that down, deliver it to people in bite-sized ways so they can understand? So curious your take on that without digging up your old biology textbook.
Yeah. It's so funny that, and I think it's just part of the beauty of life and the poetry is that fate had those plans for me. Like I madly fell in love with biology later on. It's kind of like, like the weird, I guess biology was like the weird kid and the weird girl in the movie. She's got her glasses on, maybe a little acne. And then like later in the movie, she's like had this glamorous makeover, but really she just took her damn glasses off and never mind. So, but that's what I guess science was for me. Like I found out later, like, oh, wow, you were super attractive. If my wife is listening to this, my wife is number one. Science is far distant number two, but science is my boo as well. But so, what I really wanted to do was, I know these are my friends, man, in the, whether it's a vegan protocol, ketogenic protocol, paleo protocols, everything in between, carnivore protocols. But the thing is, folks that are doing work with a high sense of ethics, they're helping people with their frameworks. Mm-hmm. But many of them know that there is, like you said, there's nuance. And again, a lot of these folks aren't abiding by stringently some of their frameworks themselves. The goal is ultimately to be more metabolically flexible, but what I wanted to do was, regardless of what diet framework you subscribe to, I wanted this to be a unifier. What are the things across the board that we know we have the most data on to be the most effective for creating optimal health, body composition, cognitive function, all that good stuff, right? And I thought that was a great idea. And then also we have the other side of the story where what are the things, regardless of your diet framework, that can absolutely destroy your metabolism and destroy your cognitive performance? And we dive into those things. So on the calorie front, this is one of the most important of any of the metrics for us to really dissect. And for me, I'm always asking this question, where did this come from? Where does this idea come from? Where, like, especially if it's something pervasive, I immediately ask the question. And if I've got the time, I'll dive into it and go and look into if people saw my Google search, they'd be like, what are you researching? Like where paper clips came from or like whatever, like so random things. But the calorie, I wanted to dive in because I knew when it just struck me. Hippocrates, considered, the father of modern medicine, gets that label. He didn't say shit about calories ever. He wasn't working with his patients like, we just need to manage your calories. This was not anywhere in ancient Rome, the very physical culture, ancient Greece, the ancient Egyptians. There wasn't anything on the pyramids about calories. People just ate food. And can you imagine a world where we all just ate food without all of the psychological warfare? Wow, what a world that would be. But I found that when the calorie was discovered, it wasn't, or if it was discovered even, it's just, again, it's a metric, it's a unit, it's used to measure the energy in a food. It's a measurement of energy, just like a meter is a measurement of distance. The problem, though, is that the meter is going to be consistent. No matter when I measure the meter, here in this room, it's the same. I go outside, measure outside, same. The calorie, however, that measurement of energy changes depending on the metabolism it's interacting with dramatically. And so when it was discovered, it wasn't even used in nutrition. It was in physics and engineering, but it made its parlay into the world of nutrition, thanks to Wilbur Atwater initially. But he's a little bit of a side note, even though we use the Atwater system for product labeling. But the person who really did it and created the culture today that we have now that is so focused on the calorie as this domineering, like it's the monarch, is the first thing in my nutritional class, my nutritional science class. First thing we talked about was the importance of calorie management. All right. It's considered the king of nutritional teaching. And so this woman, her name was Dr. Lulu Hunt Peters, and she wrote a nutritional bestseller, Key to Calories. And this was in the early part of the 1900s. She sold over 2 million copies of this book. At that time, it's basically like everybody that can read knew about this book. All right. So when we talk about like saturating culture, wow. And this was the first time that food, which what it really is, again, it's a multifaceted, dynamic, powerful entity that literally becomes us, everything about us. As you and I are looking at each other, we are seeing the food that each other has eaten. That's how powerful it is. It went from being this powerful, multifaceted, dynamic entity to being numbers. She said, you will no longer eat food, you will eat calories of food. You will no longer eat a slice of bread, you'll eat 100 calories of bread. You'll no longer eat a slice of pie, you'll eat 350 calories of pie. And she asserted that a woman who was her height could maintain her body weight and be healthy as long as she maintained a strict 1,200 calorie a day diet. But the crazy part is, and it's not that crazy, just like my professor, she battled with her weight her entire life, trying to live by these very elementary beliefs about food. And even more potentially problematic for our society, she also began the widespread indoctrination of associating food with morality. And if you can't maintain your weight, this is a character defect, and associating food to words like punishment and sin. And another thing that happened within those pages was programming our society to believe that being hungry is the goal. That's how weight loss success is found, is by being hungry, when you feel like you're starving yourself. She said, and I take these direct from her old-fangled writings, when you have a hunger pang, you should have a double joy, knowing that you're saving the hunger pangs in a starving child, because this was, a time of food rationing. And you'll be able to show loyalty to your country and lose weight at the same time, And so it was a very twisted, and I know same thing. I've worked with patients over the years. They're coming in and they literally believe that if they're not hungry, they're not doing it right. And in reality, and this is another big takeaway from today, two things. Number one, Hunger, there's a natural normal sense of hunger, largely regulated by your hypothalamus, and we can go through all those pieces. But hunger, natural normal hunger. However, chronic hunger, chronic habitual cravings, these are signs that something is wrong. Chronic nutrient deficiency leads to chronic hunger. Chronic nutrient deficiency leads to chronic overeating, right? So that's one tenet. Second tenet, and this is, again, you're hearing this is exclusive right now. And this term, you're hearing here for the first time, and I'm going to work my ass off to impress upon our culture, is epicaloric influences. All right. There are things above caloric control that actually control what calories are doing in your body. There's 6 things specifically that actually control what calories do. And once people get educated in some of these factors, it just puts more power into our hands, because the cool thing is the things that control what calories do are all really kind of simple things that we can shift and modulate and just have our metabolisms to run healthier, which is ultimately the goal.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to unpack about destroying the calories in, calories out thing. And I mean, a very basic thing, like you said, meter is a meter, no matter where you are. Well, when you deal with a complex system that's not a closed system, you have different inputs and different outputs. So a very easy way to look at it is a gasoline vehicle. Now some of them get the little fancy meters that tell you in real time how many miles per gallon you're burning. So you put the same gallon of gas in there, you have different vehicles, you don't get the same amount of distance in every single vehicle, let alone the individual vehicle and how you're driving it. You're always getting different miles per gallon. And the same rule applies with calories as an energetic measurement in human body as well. And it's just like, there's so much to do about nutrition and micronutrition and how your body interacts with things, that it's just if it fits your macro, sort of, it doesn't matter. Calories in are all that matters. Macros are all that matters. Just, it drives me fucking nuts. It's insane. Like, I mean, just looking at fatty acid metabolism and what linoleic acid versus a saturated fat does in your metabolism, alone on the things you're talking about, hunger, et cetera. I mean, linoleic acid keeps your fat cells insulin sensitive, packing fat in there, and doesn't kickstart this satiation mechanism in your brain. Saturated fat does the exact opposite, keeps free fatty acids in your bloodstream for energy, keeps you satiated for a long period of time. You don't have to deal with this hunger. This is one of countless mechanisms that we're even aware of, let alone the probably hundreds of thousands that we don't know about.
Yeah, precisely. And this is what it really boils down to. You said this earlier, that there is this, we had this thing going for a little while, especially even everybody listening has probably had this concept come up, is that it's not just the calorie, it's the quality of the calorie. But the thing about the calorie metric is that it completely ignores the complexity of human digestion. It ignores it completely. And we each have a unique metabolic fingerprint, and how our bodies interact with calories is different from every human that's ever existed in history, and will never be the same. There's nobody after us. And even next week, my metabolism is going to be different than it is today. It is a constantly changing fluid dynamic thing. And so one of those things is the quality. And this is highlighted in the study that I talk about in Eat Smarter. It's from Food and Nutrition Research. And they wanted to find out what happens when folks consume a meal of what they deem to be whole foods and a meal of processed foods. What impact does it have on their caloric expenditure? And so they had some test subjects to consume a sandwich that they deemed to be a whole food sandwich, which was multigrain bread and cheddar cheese. Then they had another group of test subjects consume what they deemed to be a processed food sandwich, which was white bread and cheese product. And if you're like, what is cheese product? That's what Kraft singles are. All right. They can't legally call it Kraft cheese. It's not enough cheese in the damn cheese. So here's what happened. These two sandwiches were the exact amount of calories, exact same amount of calories, same amount of fats, same amount of carbohydrates, same amount of protein. On paper, same food. But here's what happened. The folks who ate the processed food sandwich had a 50% reduction in calorie burn after eating that sandwich versus the folks who ate the whole food sandwich, which again, the whole food sandwich is a lot closer to nature. It's a lot closer. Your DNA can identify what's happening there a whole lot more than this heavily processed just stuff that has never really even existed before. Cheese product has never existed before in our evolution. And what happened was it created hormonal clogs. It created dysfunction and how the metabolism was working, making it more stingy and hanging on to these calories, this caloric density, and not allowing your body to process these things. And so there's so many factors. That's an epicaloric influence. Another one is your brain, what's happening in your brain. Neural inflammation is a massive problem that folks listening, they're going to hear so much more about in the upcoming years, specifically hypothalamic inflammation. Your hypothalamic is the master gland integrating your endocrine system and your nervous system together. All right. It's serious business. It's largely helping to kind of regulate your hunger, your thirst, what's happening with your metabolism, that HPA axis. Your thyroid is along that axis as well. Inflammation in your brain. You're not hearing about any diet programs that's telling you need to take care of the inflammation in your brain so your metabolism is working correctly, because your metabolism can be reduced by hundreds, even 1,000 calories a day, easy, if there's dysfunction with your hypothalamus, if there's dysfunction with your thyroid. It's not a joke. This is well noted. And it's just going to become more and more obvious as time goes on. Can you imagine? Because again, we know that somebody who has a quote higher metabolism, they could burn through, eat another 1,000, 2,000 calories a day than somebody who doesn't have a quote high metabolism. But what the hell is a high metabolism? What does that even mean? You know, and so one of those factors influencing what our calories are doing is the type of food. I'll share one more. Again, there's 6 of them, but one more, and I think this is really just powerful and leads to so many other things, is the makeup of our microbiome. This is something we know for certain. Your microbes are really the first decision makers on whether or not you're going to absorb those calories and what your body's going to do with the calories you eat. And what was discovered, this was in journal Cell, they discovered a specific bacteria in mice that actually blocked their intestines from absorbing as many calories from their food. And through the allopathic lens, you think, okay, we just need to bottle that shit up, whatever that bacteria is, sell it, stop people's intestines from absorbing as many calories from their food, make $1 trillion dollars. Humans have been doing this shit already. Swallowing tapeworms, taking these different things, even cutting out parts of our gastrointestinal tract to reduce the amount of calories we're absorbing. The problem is looking at health through this very, very tiny, ignorant lens, not understanding maybe this same activity that's taking place by that particular strain of microbes is also blocking our ability to make B12, blocking our ability to make short chain fatty acids. The list goes on and on. Nothing is happening in a vacuum in the body. And so, but couple that with human studies, by the way, because also you could be like, well, we're not mice. So human studies, this was done by the Weizmann Institute. If I sent them out to get a stool sample, you poop into like a little, like a fry basket, basically, you get French fries in high school. So it's kind of a weird thing, but you could send it out, get a stool sample, get a report back, and I could look at their bacteria, the makeup of their microbiome, the bacteria cascade that they have, and I can know whether or not they are obese before I even see them, just based on the makeup of their microbiome. And so knowing this, these researchers took samples from folks who were overweight and obese and insulin resistant and labeled these, quote, fat bacteria, and implanted this fat bacteria into lean mice. And they took samples from lean human subjects and implanted them into lean mice. And here's what happened. The mice that got the lean fecal matter from the lean humans didn't gain weight, nothing changed. Their metabolism stayed essentially the same. However, the mice that received these, quote, fat bacteria from obese test subjects became insulin resistant. They gained weight and they gained body fat because of the change that happened to their microbes. This is really where, this could be like the final frontier, but I know this is the thing about us. If we really get this, there's so much more that we do not get. And the sooner we can get that and stop running around like we have all the answers, we see like we do know some stuff now, but we know so little. And dude, like we're spinning around in the middle of the freaking galaxy on a blue ball. Like we don't know anything. We're just trying to make sense of this innate, like the grandiose is so big, so broad, so multifaceted. But things like this and understanding this internal ecology that we all have and how much it's rooted in our success as a human being And now today, knowing it controls our weight, it's an epicaloric controller. If we can get our microbiome healthy, truly, and do the things that support a healthy gut, wow, the things that can happen with our overall, metabolism and the overall health of our country.
So you're saying get lean people to poop in little fried trays, and then we'll package that up and sell it, and that will be the $1 trillion idea.
That's it. Poop. It's the new supplement.
Yeah, I mean,
take your poop today.
I mean, it's very clear. I mean, it's one of the basic things. I try to make this stuff as simple as possible, and the way I view it with food is just eat local. That should encompass everything, all principles. So, can you grow the food locally? And can you that will put it into seasonal? That will go down to, okay, you have to ship it off to a factory to process it. Okay, it's out because it's not local anymore. Do you have to ship in machinery to mill wheat? Okay, well, shouldn't be eating that then. I mean, it makes it so clear around what you should eat when. It's obviously much more complex than that. Like everything in health to me it's simple. It's really simple, but it's hard. It's eat local. Okay. Move often. Okay. Like our environments are stacked against us every other place. Like sleep deeply. Okay. Like very basic, but there's so many things working against us to do that. I mean, what are some of the things other than nutrition that you think about simplifying that have the biggest impact on people's day-to-day health?
It's a good question. I got to say something about what you just shared of eating locally. That would also entail the foods changing, depending on the time of the year.
100%.
And one of the studies that we talk about in the book was looking at how your micro makeup, the makeup of your bacteria changes depending on the freaking season. But this was for folks who are living more connected to nature, folks eating an indigenous diet, hunter-gatherers. Their microbes, there's a cyclical nature to it. And also they had so much more diversity in their microbes. And that as diversity of microbes goes down, our body weight goes up. And that's pretty clear in the evidence we have. But, beyond that.
Yeah, eating locally, though, is that people understand, okay, you eat local honey from bees, allergy symptoms go down. So a lot of food is actually, and I'm starting to dig into this more. I think the science is pretty scant in this, but I think it will be more and more prevalent as we keep moving forward about microRNA sending signals. So like your body produces all this information based upon your environment. And what's fascinating to me is if you eat beef from Brazil in a super stressful feedlot that's by the equator and you're living in, northern Minnesota or something like that, you're getting some of this information packed into microRNA about the environment. Now, how much of that is internalized and spread throughout signaling pathways in your body, we'll see. But it's just sort of an interesting thing around, we see it on a macro scale with honey and bees conveying things about their environment through actual pollen, and they're in propolis and honey. How much more of that is passed through agriculture products that we just don't know? So I'm excited to geek out on that stuff more.
Yeah, me too. Super fascinating stuff. And, beyond the food piece, which again, food is everything. It makes up everything about us. But even as I say that, it's nuanced because there's such a major player controlling the foods that you eat, controlling what the food does in your body, and it's your psychology. Our minds are incredibly powerful at dictating what is happening within our bodies. We're just largely unconscious of many of these things that are going on. And so to highlight that, number one, and I share this as many times as I can, the number one driving force of the human psyche is to stay congruent with the ideas that it carries of itself and also of the world around us. We are trying constantly to stay in alignment, to make decisions, thoughts, actions around what we believe reality to be. And this is why it can be so hard when a new piece of evidence comes in that shakes up our belief system. It gets uncomfortable, because we want the world to be safe in a certain way. And so that's one part. That's more of like the big meta side. But let's talk about this in relationship to what happens when we eat food. This was highlighted by researchers out of Stanford, in particular, Dr. Alia Crum. And she wanted to find out if your belief about what you're eating had an impact on your metabolism. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. So here's what happened. They made up a batch of milkshakes. And I take everybody through this in the book. It's super fascinating. They make up a batch of milkshakes, and each glass of milkshake, we'll just say it's around 380 calories. But they take some of them and they label the milkshake. They put a label on it saying that it's a low-calorie Sensa shake, just 180 calorie sensible milkshake, right? And so some folks got that milkshake, while other folks, they put a label on it that said indulgence. This is a high calorie indulgent milkshake. It's 620 calories. All right. Now here's what happened. Even though they were the exact same amount of calories, it's the same milkshake, they just changed the label. The folks who consumed the more indulgent milkshake that was labeled as an indulgent, they believed that they were consuming a high calorie food source. Their body's production of ghrelin plummeted, right? Ghrelin is a major driver. It's a major hunger related hormone, right? But it's also related to our metabolism overall. So their levels of ghrelin, which makes you hungry, plummeted, all right? Coupled with elevations in satiety, in leptin and other satiety hormones. Now, here's what happened with the folks drinking the Sensi shake, the sensible milkshake, where they believe it was around 180 calories, even though it was more. Their ghrelin levels barely changed at all, right? Their levels of hunger stayed the same, if we're talking about from a hormonal level. So guess what happens when you have ghrelin staying around doing its thing? It's going to lead you to drinking more, to having more, to being hungry again soon after. And this was all based on their psychology. They were drinking the same amount of calories, but their belief changed what their hormones were doing. And your hormones control just about everything that's happening with your body. These are biochemical messengers sending metabolic DMs throughout all your cells, keeping everything kind of coordinated. The problem is, what if the wrong information gets sent? And what if the information is based on your thoughts? And it's like a Paul Revere thing, and it's riding out, telling all your cells, like, there's a problem. Something is going wrong. We need to protect ourselves. And what can happen too is some of these signals, like insulin, for example, that hormonal signal, that hormone just inundating and just flooding your system constantly, that DM, that metabolic email is going to start going to spam. It's going to get flagged. It's just too much coming in. It's obviously, not supposed to be, it's a bot. And that's where insulin resistance takes place, and these things can be obviously largely from our diet, but also insulin can get released if you're stressed.
Right. Stress
is going to trigger cortisol, catecholamine release period. Adrenaline to get your blood sugar back up where your body deems it's necessary to be for your survival. Side effect of that, those things can make you pretty irritated. A lot of pissosity can happen, aggression. So this term of hangry, it's a real phenomenon, that we make jokes about, a little Snickers commercial. But these are things our bodies are always driving us to do, is to get things in harmony. And a big part of that is addressing what's happening with our psychology.
I mean, I've seen countless other studies too that say, okay, this thing's high in sugar, this one's not, and comparing the same food, people eat it, different responses in blood sugar. I mean, it's fascinating what the human mind does. Your book said super, super detailed, but very approachable. Love this thing. Why don't you give people a little shout where they can find that and the rest of your work?
Awesome. I appreciate it so much. That means a lot. So you can pick up the book anywhere books are sold, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all the good stuff. Independent bookstores could really use some love right now. This is one to definitely get a copy for a friend, family member as well. It's a lot of fun. There's so many insights. Once you get into chapter 1, there's an aha moment on just about every page. And starting January 3rd, we have a national wellness campaign kicking off with Target stores. So you'll be able to find the book at Target in its little cool wellness display. And this means a lot to me because, when I worked at Target when I was a kid, like I was a floater. I was like working in the electronics or carts or whatever. And now, the book is in all the Target stores in America. And the reason that it matters to me is that, everyday folks don't usually get access to information like this. And there's a virility to books, and that exposure, that's what changed my life, was simply getting exposure to new ideas and new information, new people. And this is going to be part of the thing that solves our biggest issues. It's just helping folks to be more empowered, getting them real information, but also in a way that makes sense to them, that makes them feel like they can do it and be successful. So, of course, you could run out to Target store, pick up a copy as well after January the 3rd. But just either way, this is a really important moment for us as humanity, to really step into our power and to take care of ourselves, to take care of our families and our communities. But it starts with us, doing these things and getting ourselves healthier so that we can, pay it forward and help everybody else that we love and care about.
Well, you're doing your job, Shawn. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Totally my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Natural State Podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd really appreciate you heading over to whatever service you're listening to this podcast on, dropping me a 5-star review and your thoughts on the show. This helps us get discovered by more people and spreading the good gospel of health. And if you want to stay plugged into all of my self-health experiments, recent research and books that I'm reading and my interpretations of those things, products that I'm testing and thoughts on all things related to health, check out my free weekly newsletter called The Feed. You can sign up for that at dranthonygustin.com/thefeed. That's dranthonygustin.com/thefeed. Thanks again for tuning in and your support of the Natural State Podcast.